in true LSU fashion, the game starts off very slow for them. They're starting from behind, which has been kind of usual here for LSU as Florida strikes early.
Shut.
Good Lord.
Starting from behind.
As Anthony Richardson hits one over the top of the LSU defense. And then after that, LSU is able to, kind of find their footing and settle in. And once Jayden Daniels gets going on Saturday, he was able to find that rhythm that I think we've all been curious if he was going to be able to find, right? So every Monday morning, our first hour brought to you by Bayou Carlin Oyster Company. Remember, you can get online to have oysters freshly shucked and buttered delivered to your back door from our friends over at Bayou Carlin Oyster Company. If you use the promo code Jordy online, you save yourself 20%. Every Monday morning, 7 o'clock hour, brought to you by our friends over at Bayou Carlin Oyster Company. What the Shuck? What the Shuck is LSU's passing game starting to come to life as Jayden Daniels on Saturday night, his best game as a Tiger, 23 of 32, 349 yards, and 3 touchdowns through the air. He also accounted for 3 on the ground. 6 total scores for Daniels on Saturday was what his stat line looked like, and it was a really good, dominant, confidence-building performance. Now, he did have the 1 turnover in the fourth quarter, which was one, it was his worst pass of the night, just kind of a little something over the middle that, he kind of threw over the top. It kind of got away from him and sailed on him and was intercepted by Florida. But a roughing the passer call, which, probably 3 years ago, 5 years ago, definitely 10 years ago, is not called in college football, but in 2022 and beyond, it's going to be called 10 out of 10 times, and it negates the turnover. LSU's able to kick their way out of it. More positive at the end was Damian Ramos coming in and booting a 47-yarder to put that thing on ice for LSU and get out of the swamp with a 10-point win. It was a very impressive win all around for LSU. I think that any time you can go on the road in the league and win a game, it's always going to be, just take it however you can get it. And for LSU to get it in the way that they, were able to, kind of go through some of the things that have been haunting them early on, special teams blunders, where you've got a muff punt, you give up a long kickoff return to start the game, and even some things defensively where you kind of had to kind of catch your footing. I know I was barking on this last week, but again, Harold Perkins didn't play enough. And I don't mean to start
do the whole thing again. Do it.
No, I'm not going to do the whole thing again, but it's
Should
just
LSU fire Will Wade?
And speaking of Caskey's clicker, Coach Caskey went back and he was watching some of the film, and he pointed out Harold Perkins' play total. He played 30 plays on Saturday. He was on the field 12 versus the run, 5 in a pass rush situation, 11 in coverage, and 2 plays that were negated. He had 5 solo tackles, 1 quarterback hurry, which should have been a forced fumble, but got called incomplete at the end of the game.
How was that?
2 calls on Saturday, I thought, for LSU were just like, what are you the Brian Thomas sideline catch to be overturned? Like, what did you see to make you overturn that? Brian Thomas, by the way, needs more targets. And that's what we're talking about, 50-50 balls with Jayden Daniels. Just throw it up. Odds are one of these freak athletes is going to just outplay the guy that's defending him. And, that's ultimately what Thomas did. He just jumped over the guy. So, it was good to see some of those names, some of those faces, some of those guys get targets. But, Harold Perkins, at the end of the game, when you needed a play, he makes a play. You know, I mean, when you look up, he's always around the football. And, you know, I mean, for him to be schemed off the field, to me, just it doesn't make a lot of sense because of every time he's out there, something happens. Even if you go back to last week versus Tennessee, we pointed it out. I mean, he was on, what was he on the field? Nine plays.
9 times.
I mean, the second play he's out there, he got a holding call against him. I mean, he's just always affecting the game. The way that he closed on Richardson on Saturday, Richardson had no idea that he could get there that quick. I mean, he shocked Anthony Richardson by how fast that he got there.
Twice.
And, I mean, it just, every time you turn on the film, Perkins is around the ball. Well, he can't be out there in nickel situation. Take Ali Gay off the field and stand him up and just pass rush him.
They did that late.
I mean, like, keep him on the field would just be my only argument. And I'm not, look, rewind the tape. You know how I feel. But, I mean, him playing 30 plays last week, that was an improvement. But, I mean, he still needs to play more. I mean, like, he still needs to be out there more. I mean, because every time he's out there, something like that happens. I thought Josh Williams played fantastic. I thought Williams ran the ball really, really hard. He made some big-time carries. Obviously, the opening carry of the second half where he busted 50 yards is the one that stands out. But I think all night long he was just bullying people. He averaged nearly 8 yards a carry. It was at 7.6 yards a carry. Williams was averaging on 14 carries for 100 yards. He obviously had that long of 50, but I mean, tough, really hard-earned yards for Williams on Saturday. I really thought that he kind of took a step forward as being a guy that you can really trust. And like we said, he's the one out of the room, the group, that really can do the most things the best. Pass protection, protect the football, run inside, run outside, catch it. I mean, he's as well polished as they have. Emory looked good on Saturday, making some plays and, helping you in both run and pass. But you don't trust him enough in ball security. You don't trust him enough in pass protection. You don't trust him enough in enough areas to have him out there for the majority of the snaps. Josh Williams has proven and continues to prove that you can trust him. You can trust him not only with the ball in his hand, but you can trust him to protect. So, I mean, he is slowly but surely becoming one of the more dependable guys on this offense that you can turn to in third and short situations, in big time down and distances to make sure and protect the ball and get you positive yardage. I mean, he to me is one of those guys that when you continue to continue to struggle on special teams, I mean, he's one of those guys that looks up and feels like his personality fits on a lot of the groups. Obviously, you don't want to lose him on a special teams play, but I mean, he feels like a guy that can do just about anything you ask him to do. Huge day for Josh Williams on Saturday. He got the game ball in the locker room after the game in the swamp. He deserved it. 14 carries, 106 on the ground, averaged 7.6 yards a carry. He also had a catch for 8 yards. And speaking of the receivers, that's exactly what you were expecting going into the season, and that's what you've been hoping to see week in, week out with the inconsistent play that's been plaguing that group. But the quarterback was taking shots down the field, was throwing the ball on time, getting rid of it, and you saw what happens when you put the ball in Malik Neighbors, Jeray Jenkins, Brian Thomas, John Emery, Kyron Lacey, Josh
Kayshon
Williams,
Boutte.
and I was saving
Sorry, my
Kayshon
bad. I didn't mean to step
for
on
the
you.
last because his 6 grabs for 115 averaging nearly 20 yards per grab with a long of 40 is exactly what the doctor ordered. I mean, that could not have come at a better time, at a better moment for both quarterback and star wide receiver to see if they can't get on schedule with one another going into this gauntlet of the schedule, because now they're in it, right? I mean, you're in the third week of, or excuse me, you're heading into the fourth Saturday in October, and LSU is got a real opportunity, I believe, this weekend against an Ole Miss team that has to be, just from a confidence standpoint, a little weary after a 48-34 game against Auburn, where it felt like they never had control of it. There were times where it felt like they were way out in front in control, but then you would turn it back and see, wow, this thing's kind of slipping away from them, and feels like, this game is a lot closer than it should be. And from LSU's standpoint, to leave the swamp with the confidence that you take away, with guys like Kayshon being engaged, Jayden Daniels having a huge day, Brian Thomas starting to make plays like he was, the defense starting to pop like they've been making plays and coming along. And even the special teams, I thought in the second half, for as much as they played bad in the first half, and they still have things that they have to clean up. And it's incredible just how much they struggle with, the basic stuff. But, look, this is the same storyline that has plagued that unit for a while. But I thought that they closed the game strong, obviously with Ramos's field goal, but even in the coverage game and, even in the kickoff game, I think that, Dilbert's doing a really good job of they're asking him to kick the ball into the end zone. Nice work. That's as simple as it needs to be. It's as easy as it needs to be.
One step at a time. We got one part of the phase figured out for LSU special teams. So let's work on catching the ball a little bit. Let's work on tackling a little bit. But who did? If you want to talk about Perkins a little bit, who shined on special teams? Perk 40.
Absolutely.
Made 2 tackles that had to be made.
He's got to be out there. Those are the types of players that need to be on those units, because they're struggling with that type of stuff. Tackling. Open field tackling, athleticism. And not going to find
no better one.
Yeah, you're not going to find too many people that are more athletic or can tackle in the open field better than 40 can. So, but back to the wide receivers. I think that the wide receivers are an obvious strength of the entire team. I think that they need to be the focal point of the offense, and that's the best recipe for LSU to have life against some of these opponents like Ole Miss, which is going to score points, and Alabama, which has proven that they can get into a shootout and score points with you as well, and have a real opportunity. Because I don't think that LSU needs to be looking at these next 2 games as sincere underdogs. I feel like that Alabama is beatable. I know that there's some areas where you don't match up well with Alabama, and for Ole Miss for that matter, but both of these teams are beatable if you're looking at them from LSU's vantage point, especially with the way that they played last weekend, or they played on Saturday. That has to be the igniter, the confidence booster that the offense has been looking for. To get Will Campbell back, how much of a difference does he make? Late in that game, you go for it on 4th down. You're nearly in the same situation that you were last week. This time you run left because you've got, this mammoth of a left tackle who's just moving people, and that's what makes the difference. So, LSU getting healthy, getting right, maybe Armani Goodwin gets back, but, Josh Williams, as we said, has really started to find his way and become the primary back on this team. These next 2 games, I also think, you catch Ole Miss at for LSU's standpoint, at a great spot on their schedule, right? They're coming off of a tough game, 48-34 versus Auburn. They play LSU. Then they've got next two games are at Texas A&M and versus Alabama. These are two huge games for Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin, a guy that, really has kind of been running his mouth all offseason at Jimbo. You could tell that Jimbo was really annoyed with Kiffin. This is something that Kiffin, Ole Miss have been looking forward to, of traveling over to College Station and going to play Texas A&M. I think that LSU kind of catches Ole Miss in a look-ahead spot. I really do, where they could be maybe overlooking LSU to the point where LSU could catch them at home. And if LSU's making plays offensively like they were making on Saturday, everybody's in play. If you can score 45, if you can score like that, well, then you can play with all of the teams left on your schedule, Alabama included. Now, again, I understand that there are some areas in that game and in that matchup that favor Bama in a huge way, and maybe even Ole Miss this weekend. But not things that you can't overcome by making plays like you did on Saturday. And getting Kayshon involved and, getting the passing game working and moving. Yeah, one thing that I loved about the passing game was, I love the vertical stuff down the field, but like Jayden Daniels had check downs. He was able to, which also limits his running, right? Like if there's somebody there for him to just dump it to rather than just tuck it and run it, it limits the hits on him. It takes away hits on the quarterback. And, you put the ball in the hands of some of these playmakers. Even though Danniels, man, how fast is he?
Well, when you turn the corner on that one going left.
To the left side?
It was right side.
Impressive.
The linebacker he knew he was going to, he didn't even touch him.
Yeah, he had the angle the whole way and didn't even get close.
He's got that accelerator where he's just like, I have another gear, you don't know it. And he just pushed it. They may be a little LSU bias, but they hit him late all the time. Like, whenever he's going out of bounds, they always give him, a little nudge on the way out. They're like, we need to get this guy out the game.
Yeah, well, to be expected when your quarterback's running like that.
Absolutely.
But I thought there was a third and, a third and, 4 or something where he was, starting to run outside. Then he kind of, cut it back inside and picked up, like a running back.
Yeah.
Like, he almost could have made, another move and, just get down. But he was, thinking, I see green grass. I'm about to take off. He is electric. This is – look, I know there's a lot been made of the Jayden Daniels saga at LSU, but if that's what you're going to get, that's why we were so opposed to the Tennessee game plan. That's not what he does well.
Yeah.
He put the game in his hands. You're going to live or die by the way Jayden Daniels plays. And if you let him do stuff where he's comfortable, Jayden Daniels seems like he can kind of thrive in that offense. It seems like a little – different game plan than LSU has been doing normally.
Well, get the ball out of your hand quick
and get them to your playmakers.
Well, I think that's what
easy stuff
people have been clamoring for, because that's who LSU is. That's who they. You have an inconsistent offensive line, and not inconsistent in the way that they're playing. Inconsistent by just the combination. Right? Just by the nature of the group alone, you want consistency of guys playing alongside one another. LSU has just not played alongside one another with the same group for an extended amount of time, which is going to cause inconsistency, and it's also going to, be a lack of trust between the quarterback and that group until you got to go through reps and, you got to go through drives. You got to go through halves. You got to go through games. You got to go through practices together. And they've just not been able to have a consistent group out there by, health has really plagued the group. But, that to cover that up, don't put them in a situation where they have to protect for a while. 1001, 1002, get the ball out of your hand. You should never get to 3, 4, or 5. And if you're at 3, it better be coming out on the click of 3. You know, I mean, it needs to be quick quick trigger, get the ball out of your hands, let these guys touch it in space. The John Emery touchdown was beautiful. I mean, like, just simple, just out route, make one guy miss, score. You know what I mean? Like, they went back to it when they needed a first down pickup in the second half. I mean, the difference of the game for LSU offensively, outside of the big plays, was the third down conversions. I mean, the way that they were converting third downs on offense. I mean, they were 8 of 12 on third downs.
That's money downs. Got to have it.
And specifically, Jayden Daniels was like, at one point, I believe, was like 6 of 7 on third downs for over 100 yards and a touchdown. I mean, they were making plays at key moments, and they were doing it with probably their best position group. You know what I mean? Where everybody's touching, everybody is contributing, everybody is feeling it, everybody's making plays, and that shouldn't be, kind of an outlying situation. It should be every Saturday. They're too talented of a group.
And I think that's why this feels so good if you're an LSU fan, is because this is what you would hope that it looked like, right? Like, when people have been, kind of pounding their hands on the table, saying, get the ball to your playmakers, get the ball to – this is why, because they're such a special group. Whenever you give them 50-50 balls, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, like, obviously Kayshon, John Emery, like, when you get those guys the ball in space, this is what LSU can look like. That looked like a dangerous team on Saturday night, where you're in the swamp, a place where Jayden Daniels has never been. He scored 6 touchdowns, 3 throwing, 3 rushing, and that's what LSU can be. That's not how Florida thought it was going to go. Like, that was I know the scoreboard looks like the scoreboard, but you're a couple plays away from that being pack up and go home, take Tom Petty with you.
They were up 21 going into the fourth.
Yeah.
I mean, for whatever reason, Micah Baskerville, he had a huge night, but he forgot how to tackle in that 81-yarder that Richardson.
Get the ball
he just
out.
Pushed him.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was.
He was trying to get him to the sideline, I guess, but at that point,
just wrap him up.
Get him down.
But I mean, they were up 21 going into the fourth. They were dominant. Would they score the first 6 drives they had the ball? I mean, they were dominating Florida for a minute. They were just like they showed that shot of Florida's defensive line, like they were melting on the sideline. Like they couldn't get it right.
Standing up on the bench.
It's like
bro, you're the one getting your ass kicked all game. It was
beating his chest.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
That's not a good sign, by the way.
No, it's not. And I mean, then they look up, and right after they show that, LSU's driving right back down the field and scoring. I think that was the Jayden Daniels keeper when he went left and outran the 51 linebacker. It was, it was for a minute there. You looked up and you were like, okay, this is what it could be. And I know that Florida is not championship level Florida, but they're also not bottom tier SEC. They made a team that is quick and athletic look slow and kind of out of space. I mean, it was pretty intimidating for a minute, I'd imagine, for teams to look around and say, wow, I mean, look at LSU's offense, the way that they can get clicking. Offensive line only allowing a sack. I think that's a combination of good play by that group and play calling by Mike Denbrock. I think Mike Denbrock deserves, for as much, as much grief as we've given him over the past couple of weeks, he deserves praise when it looks like that, because I think, whatever was coached up to the quarterback to get the ball out of his hands, and the plays that were being called were really, matching up very well with one another. I mean, just that was impressive to see those two work hand in hand with one another and see what LSU can look like when the passing game gets going.
And the running game. I mean, they didn't get away from it at all. Like against Tennessee, they just got away from the running game almost completely, and it was just Daniels throwing it 50 times and running it himself. But then, this past Saturday, they stuck with it, and they kept handing the ball off. And that's probably why the passing game came easier, was because you can't just send them back and try to shut that down.
LSU was clicking in on all phases. As bad as the Tennessee game was, that's as good as the Florida game was. That's the tale of two teams right there. That's what you get when you have a new staff and everybody. I can see how that can happen, but it's hard not to be a little bit optimistic going in after you see that Florida game. Now you feel like the Ole Miss game is not as out of hand, because if you had played Tennessee, then you had Ole Miss next on your schedule, you'd be like, well, Tennessee's going to do exactly what Ole Miss just did. Their offense isn't that different. And it's kind of more doom and gloom. You see LSU kind of put their stamp on Florida at Florida. Like, that's a big road win environment for a team that's only gone on the road, against Auburn and now against Florida. Like, they haven't been that battle-tested yet in terms of SEC play. For them to be able to kind of take over that stadium like that and be able to own the moment, that was massive.
I'm telling you, man.
And to have a former walk-on in Josh Williams be like, he's a guy now. Like, there's no Noah Kane. I don't think he played a snap. And then you have John Emery, who's like your game breaker. You can see kind of everybody finding their identity on offense. And if Jayden Daniels is able to move the ball like that and get it out of his hand, like, coach, LSU might be onto something.